There is a very specific feeling I want to invoke to start off this deep dive today.
Oh boy, here we go.
No, no, hear me out. I want you to really go there with me. Because it's a feeling I think everyone has had at least once.
Okay, I'm listening.
So, maybe you're driving alone at night on a long, empty stretch of highway, just watching those white lines flash by. Or maybe you're sitting in a meeting that just won't end, staring at the back of someone's head. You look around at the world, the asphalt, the fluorescent lights, the coffee cups, and you get this sudden, creeping suspicion that none of it is actually solid.
Like the set of a play that's about to fall over or something.
Exactly. Or like a video game where the graphics just haven't fully rendered yet. You get this sense that what we call reality is just a thin veneer, a collective hallucination we've all agreed to participate in just to keep from going absolutely crazy.
Well, if you have ever felt that you're going to want to strap in for this one,
Uh-huh.
because we're looking at a text today that argues your suspicion is not only correct, but it's actually the conservative view.
Uh-huh.
No, seriously. The reality, according to this material, is so much stranger and more fluid that we actually need that hallucination just to function. Like if we saw things as they really were, we wouldn't be able to handle it.
I love that concept. Reality as a safety mechanism. It sounds like the plot of a sci-fi thriller, but we're diving into something much more intimate and, frankly, a little bit chilling. We are diving back into the Seth material.
We are. And specifically, we are opening up the early sessions, book 6, and looking at session 254.
But before we unlock the doors to the universe here, we do have to get the mandatory business out of the way. We always want to be completely clear about this. This deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to explore, to analyze, and discuss the source material. We aren't here to tell you what to believe, but just to show you what the text says.
Right, exactly. And we should also mention that this specific material comes to us courtesy of the New Awareness Network. For anyone who wants to see the original text, and we always recommend you do because there is just so much we can't cover, you can find it through them. Their website and bookstore is at sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's April 27th, 1966. We're in Elmira, New York. We've got Jane Roberts, the author and medium. We've got her husband, Robert Butts, who Seth refers to as Joseph. It's 9 p.m. on a Wednesday. They're sitting in their living room. Jane goes into a trance. Her voice changes. She takes off her glasses, and she starts speaking as the entity known as Seth.
And what I really love about this particular session is the range. It's almost jarring, honestly. Seth starts off talking about the absolute architectural blueprint of reality. Mass shared dreams, the consciousness of stars, the way history is formed. And then in the very same hour, he pivots to a parlor game where he has to guess what's drawn on a scrap of paper sealed in an envelope.
It is a wild juxtaposition. It's like, here is the secret of the cosmos. And, by the way, your friend drew a teapot.
Right. But that's Seth, isn't it? He's trying to show that the trivial and the cosmic are actually made of the exact same stuff. There isn't a holy reality and a mundane reality. It's all one thing.
So let's start with the cosmic stuff. Because Seth opens the session with a statement that completely flips our normal understanding of cause and effect. He says, and I'll quote him here, all aspects of physical reality first exist within the framework of nonobjective reality.
Non-objective reality. That is the key term here. He's talking about the inner world. Thoughts, emotions, dreams. We usually think of those things as secondary, right? Like the physical world is the real world. The hard stuff, the concrete taxes, and our dreams are just the smoke coming off the fire. They're just echoes or our brains processing the day.
Right, it was just a dream. We say that to dismiss things all the time. Don't worry, it's not real. It was just a dream.
Seth is saying the exact opposite. He's saying the dream is the fire. The physical world is just the smoke. The physical world is basically the construction site where we try to build the blueprints we created in the dream state.
Yeah.
Everything you see around you, this microphone, that chair, the building we're sitting in, was an idea before it was a thing.
He uses an example here that I honestly laughed out loud at, but it's actually profound when you think about it. He talks about the United Nations.
Oh, yeah, the UN.
He says, without, for example, mass dreams, your United Nations would never exist.
It's a great example, though. Think about the context of 1966. The Cold War is in full swing. The threat of nuclear annihilation is very, very real. It's not an abstract fear. People are literally doing duck and cover drills.
Yeah.
Humanity is terrified. Seth says that before we could build a physical building in New York and fill it with diplomats, we had to solve the problem psychically first.
So collectively, the human species was having a mass shared dream about a place to resolve conflict.
Exactly. In the non-objective reality, that inner framework, We sensed the critical need for a solution. We dreamed up the concept of a forum for peace. We effectively held the meetings in our sleep before we ever held them in New York.
But here's where it gets super interesting. And I think this explains a lot about politics and why things often feel so frustratingly broken. Seth makes a clear distinction between the dream and the reality. He says in the dream state, the solutions are often perfect. They are ideals.
Right. In the dream, the United Nations works perfectly. Everyone gets along. War ends. Resolutions are passed and actually respected. It's the Platonic ideal of world peace.
But when we try to drag that pristine dream down into physical matter, into bricks, mortar charters, and human egos, it gets extremely messy.
He calls it a clumsy translation. That's the tragedy of the physical world. We have these perfect inner visions, but the materials we have to build them with, time, space, matter, are heavy. They resist. So the institution we end up with is a flawed shadow of the dream we shared.
That is such a helpful way to look at the world, honestly. It's not that the idea was bad, it's that the translation is difficult. It's like trying to play a beautiful symphony on a kazoo.
Precisely. But the key takeaway from Seth here is that the physical event always follows the inner event. We don't build the UN and then hope for peace. We dream of peace, and that massive psychic energy forces the UN into physical existence.
Now, this idea of mass shared dreams sounds really nice when we were talking about world peace. It sounds very kumbaya, we're all holding hands in the astral plane. But then Seth pivots to something that gave me a genuine shiver. He talks about privacy.
Yes, the illusion of privacy.
He says, and I'm quoting here again, the privacy that you imagine exists within dreams is an illusion.
It attacks one of our most fundamental assumptions about being human. We all believe that our minds are private sanctuaries. No matter what is happening in my life, no matter how crowded the subway is inside my head, I am completely alone. My dreams are my private cinema. Nobody buys a ticket to my dreams but me.
And Seth is saying, not even close.
He's saying that the dream state is actually a bustling public square. He says when you dream of others, they know it. When they dream of you, you know it.
Okay, stop there for a second. Let's really process that. That implies that if I have a dream about my boss, or my ex, or that guy who cut me off in traffic, on some level, they are aware of it.
According to Seth, yes. The connection is made. He calls it a level well beneath awareness.
That is terrifying. Can we just admit that's terrifying?
Yeah, it's certainly intimate in a way we aren't used to. It completely removes the psychological walls we build around ourselves.
But why don't we know? If my neighbor dreams about me, why don't I wake up and say, hey, weird dream you had last night, man?
Seth says that lack of awareness is deeply intentional. It's the safety valve we were talking about earlier.
It has to be. Imagine if it weren't. Imagine if you woke up every single morning with a literal download of every single thought or dream anyone had about you the previous night.
It would be absolute chaos. You couldn't function. You'd be paralyzed by the sheer volume and noise of other people's consciousness.
And this leads us to the second major pillar of this session, the safety mechanism. Why are we so limited? Why don't we see the full picture? Seth argues that our limitations aren't a flaw in our design. They're a necessary protective feature.
He talks about identity, and his definition of identity is really interesting. He doesn't see it as a thing. He sees it as an action.
Right. He calls identity a strong, organizing characteristic.
Think about that. Yourself, the thing you call you, isn't a solid rock. It's a process. It's an active filter. Its job is to take the infinite screening chaos of the universe and sort it into a coherent, manageable story.
It's like a spam filter for reality.
That is a perfect analogy. The universe is sending you billions of emails a second, telepathic signals, other people's dreams, cosmic data, electromagnetic waves. If you opened your inbox and saw all of that, your computer would crash. Your identity is the filter that blocks 99.9% of it and only lets in the emails specifically addressed to physical reality.
So when people talk about expanding your consciousness, the classic 60s psychedelic goal of opening your third eye, Seth is actually throwing up a massive yellow flag here.
He is. He's issuing a structural warning. He says that if the self were forced to perceive more impressions that it could effectively handle, the result wouldn't be sudden enlightenment. It would be fragmentation.
Huge short circuit.
You would literally fall apart. He says the self would be swept into fragments by the uninhibited use of the senses.
He even explicitly mentions drugs in this session.
Right. He says reading about drug experiences shows how blinding the undiluted reality can be. And remember the context. This is April 1966. The psychedelic counterculture is just exploding. Timothy Leary is telling everyone to tune in, drop out.
And Seth is saying, be very careful.
He's not judging it morally. He's not saying drugs are bad in a traditional, sinful sense. He's looking at it like a psychic engineer. He's saying your circuit breaker is rated for 120 volts. If you bypass the breaker and plug directly into the main power line of the universe, you are going to fry the wiring.
Wow. So the reason we don't remember our shared dreams and the reason we aren't telepathic all the time is because our ego or identity just isn't strong enough yet to handle that much raw voltage.
Exactly. We are in a sandbox.
Yeah.
Physical reality is a training ground where the stakes are a bit lower and the variables are highly limited. We are here to learn how to handle energy. Once we get good at it, once our organizing characteristic is strong enough, then maybe the blinders can come off.
It makes you look at your own ignorance a little differently. Instead of feeling stupid for not knowing things, you realize, oh, I'm blocking this out on purpose so I can focus on making my morning coffee without having a total existential crisis.
It is the ultimate focus tool. Limitations allow for specific action. If you saw everything everywhere all at once, you could do absolutely nothing.
But of course, the filter isn't perfect. Things leak through. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating and tragic parts of the session. Seth brings up John F. Kennedy.
Yes, JFK.
Yeah.
Now, context again. The assassination was November 1963. This session is April 1966. It's been less than 3 years. The wound is still incredibly raw in the American psyche. It defined that entire generation.
Seth makes a claim here that relates back to the mass shared dreams we were just talking about. He says many people dreamed of Jack Kennedy's death in advance.
Which, if we are being purely skeptical, is statistically probable. Millions of people dream about the president. Some of those dreams will inevitably involve death. It's just the law of large numbers.
Sure. But Seth goes a step further. He says on one level, this knowledge was available to the man himself.
That's the kicker. He implies that JFK, on that deep dream level, that non-objective reality, knew it was a possibility.
But he doesn't use the word fate, I noticed that. He calls it a vivid possibility.
This is absolutely crucial to the overall Seth philosophy. He is vehemently anti-fatalism. He doesn't believe the future is written in stone anywhere. He believes in probabilities. He views history as a series of choices made by the collective consciousness.
He actually calls the assassination one of many solutions to several problems. That is such a dark, utilitarian way to phrase it. A solution.
It sounds incredibly cold, doesn't it? But he's speaking from that structural mass psyche level. He says while it was not the most suitable solution, it was the closest man could come at that particular time in physical reality.
So humanity had some kind of massive psychic tension, some collective problem, and we literally couldn't find a better way to resolve it than this huge public violence.
That seems to be the direct implication. It suggests that history isn't just random events, and it's not just the decisions of powerful men in back rooms. It's a physical manifestation of the collective psyche. We, the mass of humanity, select certain probabilities to act out.
That puts a massive amount of responsibility on us. It means we aren't just passive victims of history, we are the authors.
Co-authors, yes. And Seth actually expands on this with a much more hopeful example. He talks about downtrodden races.
Right, clearly referencing the civil rights movement happening at that very moment in the 60s.
He explains the mechanics of social change. He says that people who want to change their situation dream individually and collectively of changing the situation. They act out the revolution in the dream state before it ever hits the physical streets.
There's a quote here I underlined 3 times. The very energy and direction of the dreams themselves will help change the situation.
Think about what that means for activism. We usually think of activism as marching, voting, protesting, the physical stuff. Seth is saying that the primary activism actually happens in the imagination. If you can't dream a different future, you can't build it. The emotional intensity of those dreams generates the actual energy that shifts the physical probability.
So if you're feeling helpless about the state of the world, the way you dream, the way you actively imagine the future actually matters.
It matters more than we know. It validates the entire idea of hope. Hope isn't just a nice warm feeling, it's a literal construction material. If you lose the dream, you lose the blueprint.
Man. Okay, so we've gone from the UN to the internal privacy filter to the mechanics of history. If your mind isn't blown yet, Seth has one more cosmic curveball before we get to the envelope experiment.
The radio stars.
Radio stars. Now, in 1966, astronomy was really just starting to discover these high-energy objects like quasars and pulsars emitting massive radio waves.
Right, it was the absolute cutting edge of space science at the time.
But Seth's definition of a radio star is, well, it's not what you'll find in a NASA textbook.
Definitely not. He describes them as energy knowing itself highly individualized.
He is literally attributing consciousness to stars.
Yes, energy knowing itself.
So when we look up at the night sky, we aren't just seeing burning balls of gas, we are seeing what? Beings?
Seth argues that what we see, the physical star, the light, the intense heat, is just the camouflage. It's the physical appearance that a vast, intense consciousness takes when it intrudes into our specific three-dimensional dimension.
It goes back to that flatland analogy we sometimes use, right? If I stick my finger into a two-dimensional paper world, the 2D people just see a circle appear out of nowhere. They don't see the hand, the arm, or the person attached to it.
That is exactly it. Seth says our scientific instruments are just measuring the circle. They are measuring the distortion in physical space caused by this massive consciousness. But the self-structure of the star is so intense, so utterly beyond our comprehension that we simply can't perceive it directly.
He contrasts it with us again. He says these entities can handle undiluted reality. They don't need the spam filter we were talking about.
Right. We are 40-watt bulbs. They are supernovas of awareness. It challenges our human arrogance. We think we are the absolute pinnacle of evolution because we have brains and build cities. Seth is suggesting there are forms of consciousness out there, visible in our night sky right now, that dwarf us in terms of awareness and complexity.
It gives a whole new meaning to wishing upon a star. You're basically waving at a super consciousness.
And it really reinforces the central theme of the episode, appearance versus reality. The UN is just a symbol. The body is just a symbol. The star is just a symbol. The reality is the consciousness underneath, dreaming it all up.
It's the Matrix 30 years before the Matrix.
In many ways, yes.
Which brings us finally down to Earth, to a regular living room in Elmira. Because after dropping all this heavy cosmic knowledge, Seth actually agrees to take a test.
The envelope experiment. Experiment number 49.
I love that he does this. It's like Einstein agreeing to do a Sunday crossword puzzle just to prove he knows words.
It was necessary, though. You have to remember, Jane and Rob were navigating totally uncharted territory. They needed validation. They needed to know this wasn't just Jane's subconscious talking to itself, making up grand theories. So they set up these strict double-blind tests.
Walk us through the setup.
It was simple. Robert Butts asked a friend, Don Wilbur, to draw something or write something on a piece of paper. Don did it. Robert took that paper, folded it, put it between two pieces of cardboard, and sealed it inside two separate envelopes. He then gave it to Jane while she was deep in trance.
So Jane, as Seth, has to describe what's inside without opening it, and the object itself is just a scrap of paper with some doodles.
A doodle on yellow paper, to be exact.
Let's look at the results. And for the sake of clarity, I'm just going to list the hits here because they are weirdly specific. They aren't photographic, but they are definitely not random. First on the list, he mentions the word grand, and he asks a grandparent.
Now, there was no grandparent in the drawing itself.
No, but on that specific night, Don Wilbur's 2-year-old son was being babysat by a grandparent.
Okay, so Seth is picking up on the immediate context of the person who drew the picture, not just the ink on the page.
Exactly. It's an emotional association. Second on the list, he says frame and the number 17 pictures.
This one is wild.
It is. It turns out that while Don was drawing the doodle, he was sitting in Jane and Rob's living room, and he had idly counted the framed pictures on the wall. He literally wrote 17 pictures on the doodle itself.
He actually wrote 17 pictures on the paper.
Yes.
Okay, that's a direct hit. That's hard data. Frame plus 17 pictures. You really can't just guess that.
Then third on the list, Seth gets an impression of a teapot.
Was there a teapot in the drawing?
No. But Don Wilbur was a big tea drinker, and another friend in the room that night, Bill Gallagher, was drinking tea specifically because he had ulcers.
So again, Seth is picking up on the environment and the people connected to the paper, not just the sealed object.
Then we get a symbolic one. Fourth on the list, Seth mentions a looming shape. He says it could be an unpleasant event seen to loom ahead.
And what was it?
The very next day, Don Wilbur was planning to quit his job. He had to go face his employer. He was absolutely dreading it. It was literally looming over him while he drew the doodle.
It's fascinating because it validates Seth's whole theory that emotions are actual energy. The anxiety Don was feeling was just as real to Seth as the ink on the paper.
But the piece de resistance, the final major hit on the list, is a name, Lilliard.
Lilliard.
Seth spells it out. He says it's connected. He says it's a trio that played at an art gallery.
Now, this sounds like a total miss at first glance. What does a random musical trio have to do with a doodle?
Well, Jane used to work at an art gallery, And there actually was a trio that played there called the Lilliard Trio.
Okay, so maybe Jane's subconscious just threw that up randomly.
That's the skeptic's view, sure. But here's the crazy connection. Don's wife, Marilyn, and Don himself had visited that exact art gallery the previous week. And Marilyn was actively studying music.
Wow. That is tangential.
It's what parapsychologists call displacement or fishing. It's like Seth pulled a psychic thread, Don, then gallery, then music, then trio, then Lilliard, and just followed it to the end. It shows how the psychic mind works by association. It's not a camera.
And it's a very specific name. It's not Smith or Jones.
Right, but of course it wasn't perfect. Seth got the colors wrong. He said blue and white and dark green. The doodle was actually blue ink on yellow paper.
No green at all.
No green ink. But Seth or Jane argued that blue ink on yellow paper looks greenish, or that cool colors are just hard to distinguish psychically.
What I find really funny is Seth's attitude about the whole envelope thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to care at all if he gets it right.
He is so bored. He literally says the impressions were legitimate indeed, but far too distant for your purposes. He's like a quantum physicist being forced to do second-grade subtraction. And he's like, yes, the teapot, the grandparent. Can we please get back to the nature of the conscious universe?
I'm trying to tell you that stars are alive, and you want me to guess what color ink you used.
Exactly. He dismisses the impressions as completely trivial. But for Jane and Robert, those trivial details were the lifeline. They needed to see that tea kettle to believe in the star.
It proves that Seth is a distinct personality. He's not just Jane telling herself what she wants to hear. He has his own agenda, his own high-level interests.
And that tension is what makes the Seth Material so incredibly unique. It's grounded in these mundane, verifiable details. The incense, they didn't like the tea for ulcers, but it aims for the absolute highest concepts imaginable.
So when we pull all this together, the shared dreams, the safety filters, the radio stars, the envelope, what is the real synthesis here? What are we supposed to walk away with?
I think the core message is about the self as a bridge.
A bridge between what exactly?
Between that blinding, high-voltage cosmic energy, the star consciousness, the mass dream, and the specific limited physical experience like the doodle or the tea. We are the transformers. We step down the voltage so we can actually play the game of life.
We limit ourselves to save ourselves.
Exactly. But Seth is also inviting us to peek over the wall, to realize that our privacy is an illusion, but a really useful one, and to recognize that we are participating in these massive collective psychic events, whether we actively know it or not.
Makes you want to pay a little more attention to your dreams, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Instead of treating them as weird night movies or random brain firings, maybe treat them as the actual workspace. Are you solving a problem? Are you connecting with someone? Are you picking up on the mass dream of your society?
And maybe, just maybe, we can handle a little more voltage than we think.
As long as we keep the fuse intact.
Please don't blow the fuse.
Right. If this conversation has sparked your curiosity, and honestly, how could it not, you really need to go to the source. We are just skipping stones across the surface of a very, very deep ocean.
Yes. Please visit the New Awareness Network online. You can find the books, including the early sessions, at sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions. There is so much nuance in the text that we just cannot cover in a single deep dive.
We do this for the absolute love of the material, but nothing beats reading it for yourself.
Wow.
We want you to think for yourselves. That is, after all, exactly what Seth would want.
Indeed.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought, a final provocative thought to chew on. Seth says we create our physical reality through mass shared dreams to solve problems we can't face physically right. The UN was a dream solution to the overwhelming fear of war.
Right.
So look around at the world today. Look at the weird stuff happening in the news, the inexplicably polarized politics, the bizarre technological obsessions, the things that make you just throw your hands up and go, why is this happening?
Okay, I'm with you.
Ask yourself, what if this current mess is actually a solution we concocted in our sleep? What massive psychic problem are we trying to solve with this specific reality? And more importantly, if we all just woke up to what we were doing, would the problem disappear?
Jeez. That is a thought that will definitely keep me up tonight.
Or keep you dreaming. Sweet dreams, everyone.
See you in the dream state.